The opioid crisis, a catastrophe that's claimed over 600,000 lives, wasn't just an accident. It was a man-made disaster, and the FDA played a key role. We're talking about a federal agency entrusted with safeguarding public health, yet its decisions contributed to the worst drug crisis in American history. The stakes are immense: countless lives lost, families torn apart, and an economic burden exceeding $1 trillion. This isn't just a story about statistics. It's about real people, real communities, and a system that failed them. We'll uncover how the FDA's actions, intended or not, opened the floodgates for aggressive marketing and overprescription of highly addictive opioid painkillers. By the end of this video, you will understand the depth of the deception and the urgent need for change. But here's a lingering question. How could an agency designed to protect us become a catalyst for such widespread devastation? Let's delve into the heart of the matter: the FDA's role in approving opioids. Now, the FDA is supposed to be the gatekeeper, right? They're the ones who decide which drugs are safe and effective enough to be sold in the United States. The process is rigorous, involving multiple phases of clinical trials designed to assess both the benefits and risks of new medications. But when it came to opioids, specifically OxyContin, in 1995, the FDA made some critical missteps. They approved OxyContin with a very broad indication, meaning it could be prescribed for a wide range of pain conditions, not just the most severe cases. This broad indication, coupled with Purdue Pharma's claim that OxyContin was less addictive than other opioids, opened the door for widespread use. Adding fuel to the fire, the FDA failed to require adequate long-term safety and effectiveness studies. Most trials were short-term, lasting only a few weeks. This is a big deal because opioids are often prescribed for chronic pain, meaning patients take them for months or even years. Without long-term data, the true risks of addiction and other side effects were unknown. It's like approving a car for sale based on a short test drive around the block, without checking its performance on a long highway journey. This oversight, this lack of thorough investigation, would have devastating consequences, paving the way for a crisis that continues to ravage the nation. But the approval process was just the beginning. The real damage was amplified by the way these drugs were marketed. The FDA's approval of OxyContin, with its broad indication and lack of long-term safety data, created a perfect storm. It allowed Purdue Pharma to launch an aggressive marketing campaign that fundamentally changed how doctors and patients viewed opioids. Purdue, along with other pharmaceutical companies, funded a multifaceted effort to promote the idea that opioids were safe and effective for long-term use, even for moderate pain. They downplayed the risks of addiction, claiming it was rare, and exaggerated the benefits, suggesting opioids could improve patients' quality of life. This message was spread through various channels, including medical journals, conferences, and sales representatives who visited doctors' offices. The result was a dramatic shift in prescribing practices. Doctors, who had previously been cautious about prescribing opioids, began to prescribe them more freely, often for conditions where the benefits were questionable. This created a culture of overprescribing, where opioids became the go-to solution for pain management, regardless of the underlying cause or the potential risks. It's like a carefully orchestrated campaign to convince people that a powerful, potentially dangerous tool is completely harmless and suitable for everyday use. This shift, fueled by misleading marketing, had a direct impact on the number of opioid prescriptions written, setting the stage for the crisis to explode. But there was another, more technical aspect of the FDA's approval process that also played a significant role: the controversial ERW methodology. Now let's talk about something called Enriched Enrollment Randomized Withdrawal, or ERW. This is a specific type of clinical trial methodology that the FDA started relying on for approving new opioids, and has been a source of major controversy. Here's how it works. In an ERW trial, all participants are first given the opioid being tested for a period of time, usually 4 to 6 weeks. Only those who respond well to the drug and tolerate it without significant side effects are then randomly assigned to either continue taking the opioid or be switched to a placebo. Critics argue that this method essentially cooks the books for two main reasons. First, it only includes patients who have already shown they can tolerate the drug, which doesn't reflect the general population. Second, because all participants have been taking the opioid for weeks, they've become physically dependent on it. So, when some are switched to a placebo, they experience withdrawal symptoms, including increased pain. This makes the opioid group look better in comparison, even if the drug itself isn't actually more effective. Despite these criticisms, the FDA continued to rely on ERW trials as evidence that opioids were effective for chronic pain. This decision, influenced by the close ties between the agency and the pharmaceutical industry, has been widely condemned. It's like designing a study to make a drug look good, rather than to truly assess its effectiveness. But the FDA's close ties to the industry don't stop there, and that's what we'll uncover next. This is where the story takes a troubling turn. There's a well-documented revolving door between the FDA and the pharmaceutical industry, particularly when it comes to opioid oversight. This means that people who work at the FDA, reviewing and approving drugs, often leave the agency to take high-paying jobs at the very companies they were regulating. In fact, the two principal FDA reviewers who originally approved OxyContin both later took positions at Big Pharma. And they're not alone. Over the years, several other FDA staff involved in opioid approvals have followed a similar path. This creates a serious conflict of interest. Imagine you're an FDA employee reviewing a new opioid. You know that if you're seen as being industry-friendly, you might have lucrative job opportunities waiting for you down the line. This could, consciously or unconsciously, influence your decisions, making you more likely to approve a drug, even if there are concerns about its safety or effectiveness. Critics argue that this revolving door undermines the FDA's ability to act as an impartial regulator, putting the interests of the pharmaceutical industry ahead of public health. It's like having the referee in a football game secretly hoping to get a coaching job with one of the teams. This dynamic, this blurring of the lines between regulator and regulated, has raised serious questions about the integrity of the FDA's decision-making process. And the consequences of these decisions? The consequences of these FDA failures have been nothing short of catastrophic. The opioid crisis has inflicted a devastating toll on individuals, families, and communities across the United States. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of lives lost to overdose, a number that continues to climb at an alarming rate. Addiction rates have skyrocketed, tearing families apart and leaving countless individuals struggling with a debilitating disease. The crisis has also had a profound impact on the workforce, with many people unable to hold down jobs due to their addiction. Beyond the human suffering, the economic cost is staggering. The financial burden on the healthcare system, from emergency room visits to addiction treatment, is immense. Add to that the lost productivity, the strain on social services, and the costs associated with law enforcement and the criminal justice system. Some estimates put the total economic cost of the opioid crisis at over $1 trillion. It's a cost that's being borne by taxpayers, by businesses, and by society as a whole. It's a price tag that reflects not just dollars and cents, but shattered lives and broken communities. But amidst this devastation, a wave of legal challenges has emerged, seeking to hold those responsible accountable. The tide began to turn as the devastating impact of the opioid crisis became undeniable. Thousands of lawsuits have been filed against opioid manufacturers, distributors, and even pharmacies, alleging that they played a role in fueling the epidemic. These lawsuits, brought by states, cities, counties, and individuals, have sought to hold these companies accountable for their deceptive marketing practices and their failure to prevent the diversion of opioids to the illicit market. One of the most prominent cases involved Big Pharma, the maker of OxyContin, which faced billions of dollars in claims. Purdue eventually filed for bankruptcy and agreed to a multi-billion-dollar settlement, although the final details are still being contested. Johnson & Johnson was also found liable in a landmark case in Oklahoma and ordered to pay $572 million for its role in creating a public nuisance. These legal battles have sent shockwaves through the pharmaceutical industry, forcing companies to confront the consequences of their actions. They've also sparked calls for greater accountability from the FDA, with many demanding reforms to prevent similar crises from happening in the future. It's a reckoning that's been a long time coming, a fight to reclaim justice for the victims of the opioid crisis and to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. So, where does all this leave us? We've seen how the FDA's decisions, From the initial approval of OxyContin to its reliance on questionable clinical trial methods, played a significant role in creating and perpetuating the opioid crisis. The payoff is this. We now have a clearer understanding of the systemic failures that allowed this epidemic to spiral out of control. It's a story of regulatory capture, conflicts of interest, and the devastating consequences of putting profits before public health. But it's also a story of resilience, of communities fighting back, and of a growing demand for accountability. The legal battles against opioid manufacturers are a crucial step in that direction, but they're just the beginning. This brings us to a reflective question. Will the lessons learned from this crisis lead to meaningful reforms at the FDA, or are we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past? The answer depends on our collective willingness to demand change, to hold those in power accountable, and to prioritize the well-being of our communities above all else. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and check out our recent video, USA Ready to Sanction China, which delves into another critical aspect of America's complex relationship with the world. The fight for a healthier, safer future is far from over.